It's interesting how much we use our senses when we buy. We use the sense of smell. I mean, think about your cup of coffee in the morning, or touch. You wouldn't buy something to put against your skin if it felt like burlap. Colors certainly have an impact on what we buy, and music in the background can also have an impact. You're going to read about that in your book. It's interesting when you think about how marketers can manipulate us by manipulating the sensory side of the products that they sell. Today I'm going to show you a little bit about some of the things they do to drive you in certain directions. You didn't think they had those little perfume counters when you walk into stores for no reason, right? It actually works. So can our senses, such as music playing in the background or colors in the logos, really make us buy? Do they really have an impact on it? You bet they do. If you read the book Contagious, somewhere in there you'll see that they did a research project where in a grocery store, in different days of the week, they would play different types of music. So they would play German music, and then they would play Italian music. And on the days where they played the Italian music, more Italian wine sold. And on the days when they played the French music, more French wine. And on the days they played the German music, more German wine sold. So association, music, colors, hearing, all of that plays a huge role in how we can be inspired to take that step and make the buy. And as far as colors are concerned, there's been some research done that shows that different colors are used to promote different types of things. We think of them that way. So for example, red and yellow attract impulse buyers, and they can actually make you hungry. And if you look now, and you start looking at the types of logos that are out there for restaurants like Subway and Burger King and McDonald's and Pizza Hut, they all have red and yellow in them. Yellow is optimism. Red is a bold statement. It makes you impulsive. Coca-Cola uses red. And then if you look at blues and greens, these are best for financial planning. Financial planning logos have a lot of blues and greens in them. And the reason is because we associate the color blue with trustworthiness and dependability, and the color green with health and growth. So there is something to be said for making sure you align your colors and you align any music that you happen to associate with yourself, whether it's a jingle or whatever, with the types of clients and customers and products that you sell. We are driven by our senses. So I think the red-blue story at the Olympics is very telling about how we perceive color. So red is considered to be a bold, aggressive color, and blue, of course, is considered to be a color that is not so aggressive. And what they did is they did a little bit of research on this, and they took, for example, the proportion of winners, and they looked at whether they had the red coloring or the blue coloring. And as you can see from the chart here, the majority of people had the red coloring. Now, it should have been 50-50. It should have been somewhere in the middle, but it wasn't. So what they did to prove the fact that we definitely see red as an aggressive color and blue as a more stayed back color is they had refs who looked at these videos of the taekwondos, and they had the red pennies on and the blue pennies, which are like shirts, red shirts and blue shirts on, chest protectors for taekwondo in the Olympics, and they showed them the video and they said, okay, score the match. So they scored the match. They scored, this one won, this one lost. Then what they did is they digitally changed the chest protector. They moved the chest protector that was blue onto the person that they had just said won, and they moved the red one to the person that they had just said lost. And then they began to show the exact same matches, sections of the exact same matches, and they asked them to keep scoring. And of course, you can guess what happened this time around. The person that they had just said won lost because they were wearing. The only difference was the color of the chest protector that they had on. So research shows that we have an association with colors. and that colors can make us feel confident about products, or they can make us feel that they don't necessarily align with what we think of that product. So you have to be very careful when you choose the color for your product's logo or for your product's packaging. Think about going into a restaurant and seeing a really good looking meal. Before you even taste it, before you do anything, you see the picture of the presentation, and it helps to guide you as to whether or not you think you're going to enjoy or like this meal. A messy plate, a messy place, that always spells problems for restaurants. And we are visual eaters. There's nothing you can do about that. Consider the fact that you would not go in and pick a brown steak. Americans like their meat, their steak, and their hamburger to have a red coloring to it. But if you go to Europe, everything's brown there because they don't add the additive color. All that is really color that we add to it to keep it looking like it's fresh. Why? Because we associate the color brown with raw meat as being spoiled. So you have to be careful, right? You have to be careful. You've got to add that coloring in. And if you take this a step further, I'll tell you the airplane story. So they had a Southwest flight, and they were running the same flight again and again and again. And what they did is the first flight, they had people on the plane. They took them to their location. I think it was like Baltimore to Cleveland. And they said to them, how did you feel? Did you feel safe? Did you feel good? Did you feel, like you were going to get to your destination? And the majority of people in the 90% range said, I felt very safe. The plane looked great. It was clean. Everything was efficient. The pilot, they kept the same pilot, same crew, but this time what they did is they sort of trashed the plane. They put coffee rings on the little drop-back holders. They left papers in the back pocket. They didn't clean the plane at all. And then they put people on it, and they drove them the exact same location, exact same distance. And when they did that, people said, oh, I didn't feel safe at all. If they can't maintain their plane, they can't clean it, then who knows what's going on underneath. So people have a perception when it comes to the visual. When they see visual things that they feel do not align to what their expectations are, then they can get very uncomfortable with your product and not buy. Right? A messy store, there's clothes all over the place, or clothes in the dressing room. For those of us who've been in a dressing room before, we know that when you go in and you see clothes just on the floor and hang, you typically don't necessarily buy. So how we present things visually is very important. So this is just going to drive home a little bit more how important our senses are. We are, without a doubt, sensory beings. And we can be moved if marketers know how to move us using our senses. This is a billboard just outside of Kansas City. And when you drive by on the highway, it gives off the smell of charcoal and pepper. And the restaurant has found that people mention this all the time when they come in to the restaurant, that they saw the billboard and got the feeling of the rich, wonderful smell of the steaks. The second time we've seen this is there's a car company that has a billboard in Asia inside an airport. And when you walk by the billboard in Asia, it gives off the sound of a revving car and the smoke that would come out of the tailpipe. And when you walk by, you mist right through it. And they want to give you a feel for how that car sounds and the smell and the feel of the car. And these types of uses of sensory billboards and sensory devices have been found to drive additional business. Maybe you could find a value in using senses to drive more business to your product. So even hearing can play a role in some products. Think about a soda can. That when you pop the top of the soda can, right? If you didn't hear that, you might think that the soda wasn't any good, or it might not have that same appeal. Or the pop of a champagne bottle. Imagine how much you feel like you're missing out if you don't feel that and hear that pop of the champagne bottle. If you take these things away from a product, that can sometimes impact the way a person views the product. And when you have that association, you need to make sure that you keep it, because that's very important for a marketer to keep the things that tie us to those products. I like this one. Research shows that when you're negotiating a deal for a new car, if you were seated on a hard chair, like like the picture you see here, you would offer 28% less than if you're seated on a cushioned chair. This is a study out of Harvard. So if I were somebody who was in that business, I would make sure people were seated in a very, very comfortable chair so that they would offer a little bit more. And it's interesting to think that something as simple as the chair, the physical side of what we offer people in a showroom can make that much of a difference. So this one's kind of fun. I mean, if you've been in a bakery, you've probably had the experience of that wonderful smell that wafts from the freshly made bread, and you can't help but buy the bread. But consider that there's companies who are hired specifically to provide smells for companies that will drive better results. So casinos and hotels in Las Vegas have been hiring companies like Scent Air and Airmaster and other companies in the scent field to help with their branding and to drive people to want to stay where they're seated and spend more money. Abercrombie and Fitch customers were asked if they can get the smell that you walk in the door that you smell in the store. So smells have a very strong and can have a very positive atmosphere when it comes to getting you to buy. But it can go in the opposite direction. If you walk into a restaurant or you walk into a store and it smells and it's got like a really nasty smell or a musty smell, you may not stay and you may not buy. You can manipulate images and symbols to send the right message to your clients. This is just an example of a car key that is obviously designed to look more like a gun, and then the statement is, takes one life every 25 seconds, drive safe. I think it's a very interesting, very well done play on the imagery or the symbols, whatever you want to call it. I just wanted to show you one so you could get a feel for it. So research shows that older consumers or older customers have a decline in their sensory abilities. And so if you're selling to that market, and we know that this is a very important aspect of the way we buy, there would be changes that you would have to make in order to satisfy that decline, right? And I don't know how many of you have grandparents or parents who are getting into the upper ages, but my mother likes her tea so hot that it would scald most people because it's not that hot to her. She doesn't see it as that hot. And she's more sensitive, she's more sensitive to some of these things, like she can't hear very well and her vision isn't as good as it used to be. So if you were driving to that audience, you would have to do things slightly different with the senses so that they could be detected. So in summary, when we know for a fact that our senses are part of and parcel to how we buy and what we buy and when we'll pass on something. So you need to design your product so that it drives to the senses, that the right sensory perceptions that you want. Products and messages can appeal to our senses, but they can also, as I mentioned, a bad smell in a restaurant can be a bit of a turnoff. Perception is a three-stage process that takes the raw stimulus and adds meaning to it, and that's really a key. We take what comes at us and we add meaning. Now, the smells that bother me may not be the same smells that bother you. And it's been proven that men and women have completely different levels of what's an acceptable smell. They actually have men and women try different smells, and women almost want to pass out, and men are like, yeah, that's not that bad. Subliminal advertising is, where you advertise underneath the subconscious level. And I'll give you some examples of that later in the semester. But it can be very controversial, and it usually does use some type of trick to our senses. And we interpret the stimuli using, learned patterns. So we come into things with our own perceptions, and then we just apply that to those raw materials. And marketers can use these symbols to create meaning. They can use the images to create meaning, and they can use our senses to drive us to buy more.